Hey, this video is going to be about a new topic that we haven't covered yet, and we want to dive into usage of different tools in many situations that we can get into. And one of the typical case is whenever we want to start some business, some project, and we want to get customers for our services, for whatever we're planning to do, setting the online stores aside, because e-commerce is a very standardized place where you have like a Shopify store or like something like that. But you need some place to store the customer data, which is basically a CRM platform or CRM tool. I want to speak about basically the four different types or four different levels of tools that are available for us to start with. And especially if we are assuming that we have limited resources, we're maybe building some project basically out of our pocket, and we want to spend minimal effort on actually setting up things, like if possible not hire anyone or not buy something, but yeah, depending on the situations, we would need a different tool for those. So the first one and most obvious, I think, is just like Google Docs or any table or even like any note-taking app where you can literally just save either save customers by hand or save orders by hand, or which can be exported from any form, like as in like you use a Google form to collect leads and you use the Google Doc sheets to actually handle those. And there can be a column with like the statuses, with contacts, and either you yourself or someone else can be just going through those, calling, emailing, and actually providing some sort of service. And that is basically like the easiest, and we could call it like a bottom level solution that is most easy, that is basically free to set up. But it would come with some drawbacks, right? So like you cannot use it at a super big scale, and as soon as even the number of like not orders or customers but just leads come to like hundreds or maybe thousands, it can start getting a little bit slow and glitchy whenever multiple people actually start working with it at the same time. So basically the next one would probably be something that you can maybe make yourself with some sort of no-code tools. And one example that I used to make was using Retool. So Retool is basically a tool that allows you to build a simple app with, let's say, Google Docs also, but Google Docs serving as a database. So you don't use a sheet as your interface. It just being used through API by Retool whenever you like click a button or view some lists. And because you have all the views like filtered and you can see only like a certain number of customers, rows, whatever you actually make for yourself in the app, it is lighter, and it does work a little bit faster, and it can be easier to set up the sales process around it, because you can let your salespeople see only the list of customers or the list of leads that you want them to see. And you can also be serving them just one by one. And basically the person operating the process would be viewing the next thing that they need to focus on, instead of just seeing the full list of leads and maybe getting distracted between them whenever something comes up. And then come like the bigger tools, right? So something like HubSpot, which is a super big all-in-one solution, which has a relatively generous free tier for just starting up, but then it can get pretty steep in terms of the pricing. But it does have all the tools, including all the communications, marketing channels, including web tracking. So for the lead, you will know in the same place whatever happens to them, and the salespeople can actually see that. And probably the last one we can say is the basically some self-developed platform that can be used.
Yeah, I can just say I've been in like companies and projects where we used all different ones except the sort of second option, I think, like a retool no code one. So Google Sheet usually where you start out, and then I've used HubSpot, Pipedrive. There's a lot of these different ones, right? And also all the way up to Salesforce, and also been in a company where they did build their own CRM. So I think there are different use cases for all of them. Except building your own, I don't really see any valid use case for that, to be honest. When if Salesforce is not advanced or big enough for you, then I don't know.
That's a good point. So I wonder if like building something of your own can depend on, like, if you're not only your sales process itself, but also the process of like delivering the service is very specific and very like heavy on your own, maybe tech stack. Like if you have some sort of, if it's like a SaaS tool or some sort of software that is being sold and delivered kind of partially by its own features, then maybe it could make sense to have something very, very custom. But again, like recently we've been using, like in multiple projects, we've been using HubSpot quite extensively, and it's so customizable in terms of like you can have any stages of the sale, and HubSpot doesn't really care how you name them and how many of them there is. And maybe it can be more about choosing whether to build your tool or to integrate it with something.
Definitely. I think there could be maybe some special cases, but definitely for like the projects and the type of projects and that we are in, I don't think building is a valid option, where all the other three can be, depending on the stage and so
on. So I can share maybe a little bit about Retool and like how I used it. There was actually a very specific use case, and it seemed to be a very kind of very to the point solution for that specific case. So there was actually a self-built platform for the main business, as like the main business unit, and then there was a sales process built kind of in connection to that. And there was also a different tool which managed the calls, like just the sales calls. And Retool was basically a solution to bring different data sources together in one interface. In one interface, and very quickly, because basically it was a matter of using like a data warehouse to pull in the data into Google Sheet. Everything about the leads from different data sources. And then there was a second Google Sheet, which just held the statuses of whether or not the lead was called, or like if we attempted to contact, basically anything that happened in there. And Retool was simply an interface to have salespeople work with the data from multiple data sources, which was built like maybe within like 1-2 weeks by myself without getting developers into that. So it's like it's maybe even in some, we could call it maybe even like a temporary solution while you build some proper tool to handle, either build or find or integrate a proper tool to work with existing data sets. Like Retool could be a temporary connection between those.
But isn't that something you could have made with like HubSpot or something also, or you think that would have been a longer path?
So I think that's so now I actually like until now I have worked with HubSpot a lot more. So I think HubSpot could be a good solution to actually work with that, but it maybe have taken a similar amount of time to set it up, but it would have required more time to just connect to the data, because we would have to populate the leads in HubSpot. And it would have been a lot more expensive because we were talking about like at least there were hundreds of leads coming in relatively quickly that we had to handle. So for Retool, we paid like 50 euros a month, I think, for like a basic level of whatever connections you have with an interface for people to work with.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe it could be HubSpot. But actually, I'm not even sure if HubSpot would have solved it in this particular way. So what we needed to have, yeah, maybe it actually would have, but what was needed is for the leads that we had, we needed not to build like so it was not about building the full like sales process, but more focusing on having like a call list where you would have a very specific order of calls. And like if you promise someone to call at a certain time, they should show up like at the top of the list. Or if you had a new lead coming in, then it would be like they also should be prioritized so that you call very, very quickly. And we found like actually very interesting cases that if you don't manage to call the lead quickly, then maybe we don't even need to prioritize them, because being able to call some of them super quickly is more important than calling like relatively quickly everyone on average. And it's better to call some leads within like 30 seconds than call everyone within like half an hour.
So I think that's interesting. And like the approach in general sounds interesting, because I think one common problem with CRMs in companies is that it's not like actually supporting what you are doing. It's just about documenting something so someone else can see that, yeah, okay, you've spoken to this, a manager can see it, or someone else cannot take your customer, and so on. So I think that's that's the most common I think I've seen with CRMs, especially when the organization becomes a bit bigger, that update CRM becomes a task of its own, and that you definitely want to avoid if possible. I mean, there's always if you have that sort of setup, then update CRM will happen, and then once a year you will have like it's time to clean up CRM task, and everyone will just be doing that for a couple of days. So I think the key, no matter what way to go, is try to make it sort of support the actual activities that you want to do, rather than adding an additional task.
Yeah, and I think maybe that is also one of the points towards either maybe either have something custom or even use some no-code tools, is that because we were building an interface for basically call center agents to make the calls, we would limit the interface that they would see to only the actions that they would need to do in this particular case, which is either they would say if they reached the customer, if they didn't reach them, if they didn't, there would be an automatic reminder set to call back in future. There may be some notes, but like notes is the most customized field that they would have, and the rest is just buttons to like you get to the customer, you do one action, which is calling, and then you click one of the buttons and you move to the next one. And there is no like complex interface to get like lost or distracted. And basically maybe it makes the work even more like standardized and monotonous. But like the purpose in that case is just getting as many calls for the call, like for the call schedule, for the queue.
Yeah, but then it's actually making that more efficient, rather than otherwise it could be very common that you would like get a task list, but then when you've done it, you need to go into the CRM and document it, which you won't do, and then that will become messy. Reaching the highest level of automation already in a simple setup, I think is key for a CRM to really work. Otherwise, any CRM that isn't updated, no matter what the technical solution is not worth anything.
Yeah, it's like a diet that you cannot stick to, right? It's
Yeah.
it's like only if it's worked with all the time that makes sense to have it.
And I think that's sort of maybe then the opposite of that is a question to ask when you then choose what way to go. What do we actually need at this point? And I think very early, like Google Sheet can actually fulfill that for a long time, because that is also, it's
Exactly.
completely customizable, right? And you would only put in what you actually need there, because yeah, if we take HubSpot again, that it is so big as it is, even if you can set it up for simple scenarios, just all the distractions can make it harder to keep updated than something else.
And you actually have to spend time setting it up, even from the most for the most simple scenario, because you need to customize, let's say, the pipeline, which is the statuses that your lead can go through. And by default, I think it has more than you would need at an early stage, because it's like it's either in progress or won or like discarded. That's it. You don't have any more complex process if you're just starting out with something very small. So Google Docs is like free, and you can start right away. And practically any tool that captures like email addresses would be able to connect to it to input the fields. And that can be probably used until you prove some sort of concept of whatever whatever is like the startup, right? So like you try to sell something, see if your services are needed to anyone, and like until you have any traction, there's no point in like playing work and using any like more complex CRM, unless there is a very quick growth path planned with like a big budget to start off. And then I think it's probably like a switch, like it's Google Docs first, then some existing CRM like HubSpot or Pipedrive or whatever as a next step, because it's a very standardized tool that actually does everything you would need to do with those. And maybe alternatively, for very specific use cases, whenever it's either a new business process, it could be like a new sales process for part of the business that would just not fit into the I actually, maybe that's a good example, because like a company that sells one type of product that has an existing sales process around the CRM platform, if they would introduce a new sales process, it may not fit exactly in the very beginning in the same tool. And it could be worth, and because also there is like a storage of all the contacts, so you have like a database of your customers, and maybe this could be a point for either developing or like creating with no code something very simple that would just connect existing data sources. Because if you're selling something new, you could still be approaching existing customers, so you would need to know if they bought something from the.
You could add that also in the most of the systems, like HubSpot. You could have a different deal flow for that, and you could see if they're a customer of one. You could have different products and so on.
Okay, so then maybe that's a simple one.
I think it's the same. It's the same there. Like, what do you really need at that stage? And I think it's also very easy to, like, if someone like is setting this up and is like interested in that, it's very easy to over-engineer something to make it very complex in the beginning, but that makes it actually harder to use, or makes it like more difficult to keep updated. So I think it should not be like, what CRM should we use and adapt that. It should be, what will help us do what we should be doing, that makes us make money, and what can help us do that, rather than the other way. We need a CRM. How should we set it up?
That's true. That's true. So just go off the needed like actions and needed tools, and from there we can yeah, it's possible to select something that is needed.
Yeah, and you will notice like, okay, now I can't do this that I need to do, then try to solve that, I think, rather than having the perfect solution for everything that you imagine from the start.
Yeah. Then then I think it's actually like it's a win for like Google Docs and the standardized tools so far, and it's a very rare case where you would need something like that you would have to have like as developed.
Yeah, I think so. I like what you explained there with the call center though, because that will definitely make sure that it's used.
It's a very niche. It's a very niche need when you need like a certain team to execute a very specific action, and you don't need them to like have to work with more data than they need to access, and you can that way like prioritize very much the work process for them.
Yeah, and for them it's not really a CRM even. It's like their work tool to
Exactly.
know
Yeah, then it's not a CRM, then it's just an interface for part of the data that can be like either extracted from some CRM or from something else.
Which I think is ideal there, because you don't really want to have that update CRM feeling. They never thought they were updating the CRM, but they were doing their work, and at the same time the CRM was kept exactly correct. So yeah, there could be cases where that maybe would work even better. And you could of course connect that. So you use Google Sheet, but you could probably connect that to something else also. So that might be something depending on the organization project to consider, to have like just a different interface to feed into that, because you could set up like some HubSpot form connected to HubSpot or something, so that the actual work is not being done within the CRM. If that is like too complex and distracting, maybe you could have a very simple interface for the specific tasks.
Yeah, so you don't need to have like Google Sheets, and also if you use the no-code tools, it can be connected directly to some database that is used for something else at the same time. But you know about like also the self-developed tools. I think it would probably also, maybe it would be just fair not to call them CRM tools exactly, but if we're talking about the product that would have just like product-led growth, so if it would be not exactly like a sales team working on the sales process, but more like users onboarding themselves, then basically the CRM part of the kind of the process can be part of the actual product, where you would have the customer data, and the customer data would be connected to whatever the customer actually does with the tool. And then, and then like the CRM tool would be not needed as a standalone thing, because it's not going to be a sales team pushing that to go through.
Yeah, and I've been in projects where we use like Intercom and Crisp and stuff like that as a CRM basically also. So if you only have like online sales channels, and it's product led, as you said. So whenever they sign up as a lead, they come in there. That means you have automated campaigns and so on, and then you track some of the actions they take also. So maybe that's a fifth sort of. It would be in the
kind of part of the.
But it's like it's not a CRM first tool, but it could be used as a CRM.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe one of the examples is like to our discussions of the Shopify apps. Like when you launch a Shopify app, it's not being sold proactively to merchants. It's more targeted towards merchants just installing them. Yeah. But whenever someone installs the Shopify app, this is kind of the first step, or one of the first steps into actual sales process, because they need to start using that, and they need to like onboard themselves to see the value, to then decide to maybe move to the paid tier of the app. And for that, it would be all about the product features themselves to actually lead the customer to try the features. And then again, using like some of something like Crisp to answer questions and to push people to actually try everything. So maybe we can, going forward, try some specific use cases and maybe like either build something or look into like a more detailed use case and what to do about it, either in CRM or maybe some other space. And to anyone watching until this point, yeah, you have to subscribe and like it, otherwise it's not gonna work. That's it then.
Yes, thanks.
Cool.